Welcome to Boomer Knife Talk, the only place where we shake our fist at the sky and talk about how great things used to be. What's going on, guys? Carter here with Edge Mindset. Got another topic video for you. So, the other day, I published a video talking about, talking about the past, my experience with collecting knives like in the mid-2000s compared to today, and how there's pros and cons to each side, how we're missing things now that we used to have then, but then we've got things now that we didn't have then. And it did amazingly well. I was very surprised. I honestly wasn't even going to upload that video. Maybe I'll link it down below as a related video. I didn't think it was going to do that good, and got a lot of positive response, and it kind of kicked up some memories and some thoughts and some ideas. And so I want to talk about this particular aspect of kind of knives. So these two knives right here have probably given me the most amount of hate of any knives that I've featured on my channel. These two cute little innocuous knives here probably have received the most amount of hate, the most amount of comments of people talking crap on them. And so I've been wanting to feature a video talking about these two in particular for a while now and why they're so hated. But I haven't done it yet until now, because I've got some thoughts I want to explore about. I did some self-reflection as to why did I buy these? Why do these speak to me? And I think I have an answer, and I will give you that answer as to why something this ridiculous and dumb appeals to me. But first, let's talk about why people hate these. So there's only, I think, like a small portion of people that these really appeal to, right? So people that have been in the knife game for a really long time, so before my time, hate these knives for two reasons. One, they're very stuck on, practical, right? Knives should be practical, they should be usable, they're a tool, right? They're not art, they're for gutting fish and hunting and doing work. And also because they're made in China. So those two reasons exclude those people, most of those people. I don't want to be overly generalizing, but most people in that category, older than me, that have been in the knife game longer than me, hate these knives for those two reasons. People younger than me hate these knives for the first reason, which is, the practical, right? How do you use it? It's not a slicer. It's not going to cut paper, all those kinds of things. So kind of a cool full circle thing. They don't care so much about the overseas part of it. I mean, some do, but for the most part, the younger generation, the new guys, don't care about overseas knives. But why does my specific age group, right? So we're talking early 40s to mid 40s, very small, really. Like you could even maybe narrow that down to even less, right? Like, people around the age of like 43, 44. Why do they seem to like this knife? They love these knives. Well, they don't love these knives, but compared to the other groups, they like these knives. And I think I have an answer, because I fit into that category, and I think I have an answer. And the answer is, I'll talk about it. Here, let's talk about it. So, back in the day, and I spoke about this before, these were the type of knives. You can see I've got a color choice here. Ooh, these are nice. Aren't these sexy looking? Back in the day, when I was first coming up into knives and really, I mean, we're not talking like, when I was a kid, I loved martial arts weapons and swords and Gil Hibben things, like fantasy stuff. But when I got into like wanting to get into nice quality knives, this is what was available, right? Things like this Spyderco here, things similar to this Ramette Rhino, mostly purpose-built, usable type knives. What else do I got here? Got another Ramette here. Usable, purpose-built knives of varying price categories, right? Entry level to more expensive. In fact, the Endura is the first, real folding knife that I ever bought. And it wasn't even this cool. It was very plain Jane, satin blade, black FRN handles. That's it. Bought it at Sportsman's Warehouse for way too much money at the time, because they, upcharged like crazy. But this is what was available. Now, if you wanted to get, and the whole market was this, right? Plastic handles, G10 or FRN handles. You had lockbacks. You had the revolutionary compression lock, which was pretty rare then, but mostly liner locks like this, right? This is what You were able to get, this is the stuff you would buy. And then at the gas stations, they had cheaper versions of this. They were kind of more colorful and kind of obnoxious, but they were still just liner locks with cheap steel, pretty plain handles sandwiched together with screws, right? This was the whole market. If you wanted anything exciting or interesting or crazy or out there, you had to go into the custom knife world, like this Phil Harvey Peacemaker. Now, this isn't from that time. I'm just using it as an example. This is a newer knife, but and a very extreme example of what I'm talking about here, like way extreme example. But this, you would have to go into the custom knife world because companies like Spyderco, they had to play a numbers game, right? They had to make knives that appealed to the most amount of people because manufacturing is expensive. It was expensive then, it's insanely expensive now. So they had to make knives that appealed to the most amount of people, which was usually pretty plain Jane knives, very purpose-built, thin blade stock, meant for cutting. The handles were just what was needed to hold on to the knife. Nothing special. They couldn't take any risks because they had to sell thousands of units of each knife that they made. They couldn't do something wild like this. They would lose so much money. Even if a small group of people really liked it or wanted it, not enough people would buy it to make it worth the cost of getting the new tooling and the upgraded materials and things like that. But in the custom knife world, it was a whole different ballgame. A custom knife maker could order half-inch stock steel because he's doing things on such a small scale, the increase in cost was nominal, right? He could just pass that on to the knife. It wasn't that big a deal. He wasn't buying thousands and thousands of pounds of steel in bulk in order to make his manufacturing process make sense. He could order a sheet of half-inch steel and make a handful of knives as a special edition, and he knows he would sell them because he only has to sell a handful of knives. He doesn't have to sell, 5,000 units in a certain amount of time in order for it to make sense and pay for his manufacturing process. He was doing it all, or she was doing it all on a small scale. So they could take these risks. They could do wild things. And we saw this happening, and it blew our frickin' minds. Yes, this is ridiculous. You can't really use this knife. I've actually tried to carry this thing. It's near impossible. Once again, let me remind you, this is an extreme example. I don't actually have a more realistic example. I mean, maybe I do. I could have grabbed my Chavez custom scapegoat. But this is an extreme example, but it's to prove my point, right? Not practical, not usable, but absolutely mind-blowing, right? Different than everything else that you would have seen back then, everything else that was available. But the problem was very expensive, especially for me at that time. I was a youngish lad, new in my career. I had a young family, trying to figure out this whole adulting thing. I didn't have money to buy these, and if I did, it was just temporary, right? If the few customs that passed through my hands quickly left my hands because, yes, I fronted the money, but I could not afford to keep that knife. So I had to let it go. Flash forward to now, right, where things have changed because of Chinese manufacturing, right, being so inexpensive. Now, all of a sudden, you can get the same type of ridiculous knives that sparked my interest and my love and rejuvenized me and introduced me to the concept of knives being more than just a sharp piece of metal. Now you can actually get these things for a reasonable price. Of course, that's relative, right? Reasonable price. But no longer do you have to spend $2,000 on a custom, just a few $100. And you can get something that kind of reminds you of those crazy knives that just exist to try to push the boundaries, right? And even though it's kind of hollow, right? You can't compare a custom knife like this to this. It still gives me gets those juices flowing. It gets me excited. When I see something like this, it's the same feeling that I felt when I saw something like this back in the day. Something that's just like, what is that? How can that exist? And so that's why I gravitate towards things like this in moderation. Right? I'm not scooping up every single example. I've got a handful of ridiculous knives that kind of scratch that itch. I've actually kind of calmed down on that, right? Max Ace stuff, these. I think I'm good, but that's why, because something like this would have been insanely expensive, not only from a money standpoint, right? I only mentioned how much it costs to get something like this. But this isn't something you just go to a website and add to cart, too. You've either got to be put on a long waiting list to get it direct from the maker, go to a knife show and get it there, or keep checking the for sale ads and try to get one on the secondary market, which is how I actually scored this one. And it was still very, very expensive, right? So I think that's why, because there was that small pocket of time in the 2000s when things like this hadn't existed before, and they came out of nowhere and just slapped people across the head with, what the hell is going on? How is this a thing? But they weren't very attainable. And so now, because of the change of times and more affordable overseas manufacturing, we can get a taste of that same excitement in something that we can actually kind of readily buy. So if you see a boomer that's excited about knives like this, and you feel that urge to like knock him down a peg and say, that is so ridiculous. Why would anybody want something like this? You can't even, does that even cut, bro? Bro, does that even slice? Before you throw those comments, just remember, we're all on a different journey. We all have different things that excite us and different experiences, right? Like you didn't go through the time that generated interest in stuff like this, maybe. So have a little compassion, be a little bit nice, understand that we're all just trying to have a good time in the knife community, right? And we're all kind of into different things, and that's okay. That's what makes it cool, is all of us being a little bit different, having different experiences. So yeah, just try to be a little bit kinder to the old people that like this stuff. Now, that being said, lots of young people like it too, for the same reasons. It is exciting, it is different, right? In a world of little slicey, smaller, fidgety knives, something like this kind of, I don't know. It is exciting. I will admit, as much as I love this Miguron get-in here, I will look at this thing and I'm like, what is this for? Like, it barely cuts anything. Like this one in particular, literally, it is so thick behind the edge. Like, it literally does just about nothing. It is a pocket art brick. But you know what? That's okay. That's okay. It's still cool. This one actually cuts surprisingly well on this flat here. Look how high that grind is. Anyways, we're not talking about that. So, all right, guys, that's it. Just a PSA. Be kind to your elders. Be kind to everybody, right? We don't need to be hating. We're all knife enthusiasts here. Like, we don't need to be fighting about fixed blades and folders and, what people are buying and why they like what they like. We're all just trying to enjoy knives and a hobby in different ways. All right, guys, I'm out. Catch you later.